Charlottesville to Zion Crossroads. Now on News Talk 107.5 FM and 1260 AM WCHV.
You are listening to conservative Maverick, Flint Engleman, on the American Maverick Show.
And we're back with the American Maverick Show on News Talk 107.5 FM WCHV here in Charlottesville and on Red State Talk Radio nationally. I had a blog post on my blog at theamericanmaverick.com this past week just to remind folks that we do have a larger listening audience. We love our local audience here in Charlottesville. We are also on Red State Talk Radio Network. They rebroadcast us 3 times per week nationally. We are a top 5 rated show on their network, and we are reaching out, and I'd like to say hello to all of our listeners on that network as well today. Now, let's have our featured guest with us. He's a return guest, Marc Hyden. He's with the Conservatives Concerned About the Death Penalty. Marc, welcome back to the American Maverick Show.
Flint, thank you so much for having me back. It's a pleasure.
Fantastic. We had a good discussion about your group, and I wanted to have you back for to get your message out there to let folks know what you're talking about, and also you have some updates as well as some partnerships that you formed that I think the public ought to know about as well. Marc, why don't you start out just kind of telling folks in brief what your organization is focused on?
Sure. Well, just in a nutshell, we're just a national network of conservatives and libertarians as well who believe the death penalty is inconsistent with our principles and values. So we're just shattering that myth that exists out there that we blindly support the death penalty because we don't. And we're just trying to educate and engage the grassroots and grass tops and let them know about this broken program.
Okay. And is the best way for folks to learn more about your organization is at conservativesconcerned.org? Is that the right?
Absolutely.
Okay, fantastic. Marc, what specifically did you want to discuss? I had a little time to prep, and I normally do a better job, but did you want to go ahead and talk about the partnerships you formed?
Sure, I'd like to jump right in. A lot has happened since the last time we spoke. I believe we spoke back in March. But since then, we've seen an outpouring of conservative and libertarian support for repealing the death penalty, and we're seeing conservatives and libertarians both across the nation, many of which are uniting and standing cohesively in opposition to this broken program. And we're very pleased to see that. And if you pay attention to Gallup polling, there was a national poll that came out that said the support for the death penalty is at the lowest it's been nationally in the past 40 years. So we're seeing that the national tide is turning against the death penalty. And I always like to point out the poll that was done in North Carolina that showed 68% of North Carolinians supported repealing the death penalty and replacing it with life without parole as long as the offender worked to pay restitution to the victim's family members. So the narrative is changing nationally, and you can see that in our partnerships that we've been very fortunate to make. Young Americans for Liberty is the largest and fastest growing pro-liberty organization on college campuses across the nation, and we were fortunate enough to form a strategic partnership with them. So that enables us to educate and engage the youth, the pro-liberty youth that is definitely our constituency and the constituency of the conservative movement. And then what also grew out of that is Dr. Ron Paul, former former congressman and presidential candidate, formally came out against the death penalty and endorsed our group's efforts. So we're seeing a lot of things that are happening, and we're just so proud as an organization to have some of the conservative leaders like Brent Bozell, Jay Sekulow, Ron Paul, and Michael Steele all standing together with one unifying message that this program, the death penalty, it's not working. So we need to take a step back and look at this. So a lot has been going on, Flint.
Those are a lot of notable conservatives. I have a lot of respect for Jay Sekulow, and with his endorsement, that got my ears perked up and got my attention with what you're doing. Marc, tell us a little bit about the kind of the nuts and bolts about what specifically got your organization together and what issues are driving changes in the death penalty system.
Well, we actually grew out of a state coalition of conservative legislators and grassroots activists in Montana who came together, and they're all surprised that they all had problems with the death penalty for various reasons. So we grew out of that because they had quite a bit of success, and there was support, or many of them were asking for a national group, and we answered that. But every conservative, every libertarian, every person has their own personal reasons to come out against the death penalty, because there's no shortage of reasons to oppose it. For many of us, we're pro-life. So if we see a program where you run a risk of killing innocent people, it's hard to support that. And one of my friends, Larry Ford, I always talk about, he's a former GOP chairman out in North Carolina. He said there's no oops moment. You don't get to redo executing an innocent person. You can't get that back. You can't right that wrong. And many of my other conservative friends believe, this program time and time again has been shown to be far more expensive than life without parole. And that's widely accepted. So it's hard to support that if we're fiscal conservatives. And I had the pleasure of sitting down with State Representative Steve McManus in Tennessee, who said it's time conservatives get real. There's no sacred cows here. It's expensive. It's wasteful. We need to take another look at it. And then many of my pro-liberty friends, they tell me this just doesn't fit in with their philosophy when it comes to limited government, because they believe it just gives the government a power that's just far too powerful. This is a program to kill U.S. citizens, and they don't believe that the government has deserved or earned this power.
Now, are you suggesting that, I'm just trying to get into it a little bit, are you suggesting that instead of the death penalty that they are giving life sentences without parole, without the death penalty? Is that what you're suggesting?
Yeah, I would support life without parole. I know many of our supporters would support looking at life without parole. I know Bill O'Reilly has even come out and said that he believes that we should take a look at the death penalty and consider life without parole. And I think he even suggests letting them work to pay restitution to victims' family members. So there's no real answer that our group has. We just want to show people how broken the system is. How we fix it, that's up to the individuals at this point.
Right. Another aspect, I think I asked you this in March, but is technology. Has technology grown to a certain point? I'm talking about with DNA technology that is able to confirm that this person is or is not innocent. I forgot what state it was, but recently there was somebody released that was improperly incarcerated for years. And a lot of that was testing, but a lot of it was police work that kind of cleared up what was holding this person in prison. Isn't technology to the point where, if someone is convicted and they're tested and verified they did that crime, that they should pay the ultimate price for, a heinous crime?
We live in a world where we see these shows, CSI, and we assume that that's how it really is, but criminal cases, DNA evidence is only there in 5 to 10% of them, first off. And then much of this other data that they rely on, the government and the criminal justice system, isn't reliable. The FBI and the Department of Justice recently came out and said, we have been working on this forensics using hair analysis to convict people. Well, 27 people were convicted and sentenced to death, and they were convicted on hair analysis that they have admitted, the government has admitted, is not reliable. And this is the same with many other forms of forensic evidence. We saw with, fire science. They have a hard time determining whether or not it's arson or not. So when it comes to forensics and technology, we're not there yet. And I don't know if we ever will be there to where we can say with absolution that, yes, they are that guilty. But the government keeps making mistakes when it comes to forensics, and, it's not like we see in CSI.
Okay, I'm trying to look at it from even a different perspective as well. Say a victim's family, sees that a person is convicted of say a brutal murder or something, and the family says, okay, they should get their just desserts for what they did to my family member. What does this say to? I'm just thinking of some families want some kind of vindication. What is it? What you're doing do for families that want justice done for what was done to their family member?
We actually work very closely with victims' family members because the harm has been done to them and their relatives. So we want to hear from them, and we have, and many volunteer to work with us because what we've seen is most victims' family members that I've been able to talk to don't support the death penalty. And even the ones that do support it, they say the system does not work for them. This is, the appeals process is years, it's decades. So many of these people are dying, the offenders are dying in jail of old age, natural causes. So regardless of whether they support the death penalty or not, in principle, in practice, it doesn't work for anybody.
Okay. Now let's move a little bit to the legislative side of this. How are you actually working on policy side with states or federal government? I'm not sure. What are your efforts on, and how many states are you active in trying to make a move with making some changes?
Well, we're trying to educate people, obviously, from the grassroots up, and there's been enough success with conservatives concerned about the death penalty, where we're seeing states starting to form their own local conservatives concerned about the death penalty groups. Of course, we grew out of Montana, so there was already one that was very successful there, but Nebraska came very close to repealing the death penalty, and that was based on conservative support. Came very close. They had probably enough votes to pass it, but there was a minority filibuster that held that up. But Kansas, they have great conservative support there, and they're building one. Kentucky, North Carolina, Tennessee, Delaware, and so on. So we're in multiple states that have a very large conservative constituency that is coming out against the death penalty. And I think when we go through this process of education and engaging the grassroots, that will work its way up, and then we'll see some real change.
Marc, thanks so much for your time with us. I would love to have you back in 2014 with another update. I just think this issue needs to be heard, so you can do what you're saying is get that education out there for folks to consider. Thanks so much for coming on the show.
Thanks, Flint.
Marc Hyden with Conservatives Concerned About the Death Penalty. Go to conservativesconcerned.org for more information. Thanks, Marc. And, folks, we're going to take our first break, and we will be back after the break with our American Maverick feature, the Don Marco Intelligentsia segment. I think you'll be entertained by that, and especially the information that Don Marco has to provide. So here's a break.